What's going on, y'all? Welcome. I just got back from a trip to the Smoky Mountains with one of my buddies, Johnny Nature. You can look him up. Dude's it's awesome, dude. We had we went in with the intention of really just opening up and allowing for whatever wanted to come up to come up. I mean, even me personally, sometimes when I go into these kinds of journeys, there seems to be like this big overarching kind of like breakthrough, or this question, this desire that I have for, some kind of yearning, some kind of wanting to have some kind of realization. But where I've been at recently in my own evolution and involution has been this process of deepening my acceptance and surrender to all that is unfolding, because I'm realizing more and more, the more that I try, the more that I put myself out there, exert my will, exert my energy to try to make something happen. You can even just tell in that language, this very masculine language and way of doing things, which is not inherently right or wrong, good or bad, but it can be limiting if it's the only way that we approach from. And this kind of very masculine way of going about things has been very prominent in our recent evolutionary history. I mean, really, what's this whole industrial revolution and then the information age has all primarily been an outpouring of this masculine energy of this penetrating, this going out, this going forth, building things, making shit happen energy, which is what we needed to get to this place. But as the old saying goes, what got us here isn't necessarily what's going to take us further. And so as we are going through this shift, and I know more and more people are starting to recognize this shift taking place. And that was one of the big things I noticed on that trip, being in the Smoky Mountains and just being immersed in Mother Nature, just kind of unadulterated nature. And especially the Smoky Mountains being kind of one of the most ancient forests, the most ancient places on earth, and feeling that support going into that process, it was really allowing me to feel more and more into this transition that is taking place, and ultimately who I am supposed to be and how I am supposed to serve and to show up through this transition. And when I say transition, it's really just this, like a pendulum swinging to the other side, where again, the way that we've been doing things isn't necessarily what's going to continue to allow us to grow. And so this pendulum is swinging to the other side and moving more into this, the great feminine, where there's this sense of deepening the process of surrender and acceptance and embodiment, and how paradoxically, through the process of just being and just allowing life to happen, and for things to take their own time and to happen in their own way, just allowing space for all of that, that in itself is the way to continue this process of evolution that we are going into, that we are being a part of, that is just continuously happening. And underlying all of this, because we have awareness, and I'm currently studying Gene Keys, which is a very, very powerful resource if you want to kind of get deeper into this stuff. But we have this awareness that grows. So every being, even from the insects to the trees, plants, all the way to mammals and then humans, we are all endowed with a certain level of awareness. Now, a rock is going to have less awareness, at least in our current way of defining it. A rock is going to have less awareness than a plant. A plant is going to have less awareness than some kind of mammal, like a dog, which is going to have less awareness than a human. But it's not like this off-on switch, unaware to aware. It's a spectrum. Because even a rock has a certain level of awareness of its environment and how it stores energy and information. Because even the fact that something can be formed, that something has a formation, means that there's a certain level of information. So this awakening of awareness, this expansion of awareness, is currently taking place at a lot of different levels to a lot of different degrees. Obviously, our own human experience and our own awareness of all that we are. But underlying the process of awareness is just consciousness itself. And it's important not to get caught up in the terminology and all the words, because even words can be misleading because they're inherently limiting, and inherently, because if I say dog and you think of dog, that's cutting off potential for there to be any other meaning of that word based on the label that we put on it. So the same thing is true with all these words, is just going in with the understanding that ultimately, using this medium of communication, there's going to be a little bit of a breakdown in the meaning and the interpretation. And so it's important not to get overly caught up in the precise language of things, even though we do our best to use precise language that has, because the language is, there's a vibration to it, there's a frequency to it, and that's why different words carry different kinds of energy, because there is a certain level of frequency to it. But either way, so the awareness that is constantly expanded, and underneath that is just consciousness itself. And now consciousness itself is just what is. It's just all of it in its entirety, and therefore, consciousness itself doesn't necessarily grow or decay. It just is. It's just kind of this underlying field, like the dance floor, that allows this whole dance of life to happen. Because you can't have this experience without there being something to have an experience upon. Just like it wouldn't be any dance if there was no dance floor. And the dance floor actually, because it connects all of the dance, it connects all of life, because in essence it is the foundation of it all. It is able to, through the process of awareness, which would be like akin to different dancers. So different dancers are doing different dances on the dance floor of consciousness. And through the dancers doing the dance and having an experience and ultimately growing and evolving their awareness, the dance floor becomes more and more aware of itself, even though it is underlying the awareness. So it's like or you can even use the analogy of like an acorn, where the acorn has all of the information of the oak tree, even though if you try to cut the acorn open, you will see nothing that looks like an oak tree. But if you give it the right resources, if you give it the right environment, it already has all the information it needs, and then the awareness will grow out of that into the oak tree. And so the reason I bring all of this up is because this is essentially what is happening at a deeper and deeper level. And even when I say deeper and deeper, it's also, it's as above, so below. So the depths of the awareness match and coincide with the expansion of the awareness. And as you grow your awareness, you begin to realize more and more that you are the dance floor. And another example is like sound. So sound couldn't exist without silence. Even though we don't really recognize the silence, and it's kind of just, it's all pervading. But without that silence, without the foundation, the sound could not have a way to be expressed, in a way to be heard. And so it's just another way of thinking about it. But either way, as your awareness grows, your awareness of you being the dance floor, of you being, of the oak tree actually being one with the acorn, of the sound being one with the silence, that awareness begins to grow. And that is ultimately this process. And this whole concept of evolution is essentially this process of consciousness coming to know itself as consciousness. Or in other words, as a human being, it's like this whole evolution is going from this idea of unconscious unity. Think of like a baby in the mother's womb. There's this unconscious bliss, this unity, because there's no idea of separation, because it is just one with the environment, is one with what is. And then there's a birth, this is like very important symbolically. There's a birth process, and even the concept of a birth already has the implication of some kind of death. So the baby is born, and in that birth process, kind of, like an infant, begins to become this conscious awareness of separateness. So like if you watch a child develop, especially between the ages of like 0 to 7, and there's a nice cycle of 7 years that you can pay attention to in life cycles, where 0 to 7 is a foundational point, and then physically, and then 7 to 14 is a foundational cycle emotionally, and then 14 to 21 is a foundational cycle mentally. And then I'd even argue, these kind of cycles continue to very less degrees, and they kind of end up, it's like a spiral. You find yourself back in the same place, but from a different perspective, from a higher level. But either way, once a baby is born, once you are born, once awareness is born, it goes through this process of realizing and becoming aware of itself as an individual. And this is very important, because if you come from a place of unconscious unity, you're just one with all that is, but you have no idea that you're one with all that is, because it's your only perspective. This is akin to essentially God or consciousness itself. It has no awareness of what it is, because it just is all that is. And so in order for consciousness to have an experience of itself, awareness is born. And because awareness is born, that already has the seed that there is going to be some kind of death that is going to happen, because it's just a cycle of life and death. Death and life can't exist without one another, just like light and dark cannot exist without one another. So like in this unity of consciousness, the illusion of duality is formed. Complementary opposites, the yin and the yang, they always exist with one another, because they can't exist without one another, because they are born of just unity. And unity can't become non-unity unless it's just an illusion, which is always inherently in balance. I hope you're following me here. So a baby is born, and then it goes through this process, and this is like 0 to 7 years. There's this process of conscious separation, where it's like, okay, now I have this idea of me as this separate thing from everything and everyone else that seems like they're out there. And this inherently brings up a number of different challenges. And you can see this happens at an individual level, but this also happens at a collective level, and is happening at a collective level. And then as you go through life, or as awareness evolves, you become more and more aware of yourself. And the paradox is that the more you embrace your own individuality, the more your sense of self will begin to expand, because you'll start to realize that what you think of as yourself is really a lot of things. Because the air that you breathe, technically, depending on your point of view, it comes from outside of you. But you wouldn't be here without that air. You wouldn't survive without that air. And the same thing is true with food and essentially all of the elements. And like our body, because we forget that we are a product of the earth. And so all of the elements of the earth, which is a product of the galaxy, the solar system, which is a product of the universe. So it's like all of the elements of the universe are present within our body. I mean, within literally our DNA. And so as we continue to grow our awareness, our sense of self begins to expand. And as it continues to expand, you eventually get to a place where, if we kind of just future pace, but again, in these kind of realms, time is very illusory, because time wouldn't exist without this idea of separation. And so as your awareness evolves, also the sense of time changes as well. And remember, this is happening individually and collectively. But either way, from that place of unconscious unity to the place of conscious separation, you begin to evolve into the place of conscious unity. And this is consciousness becoming aware of itself. And as you approach this place, which paradoxically, it's not necessarily a place that you get to. It's not a destination. It's what's already right here. And this is kind of the big cosmic joke of it all. Like everything that we're trying to search for is already right here, right now. And the whole process of searching implies that there's something that isn't already right here and right now. And so it's like, in a sense, we have to go on this journey of searching everywhere outside of ourselves to come to a place to realize that it's not there. We can't find it. And then ultimately, because we can't find it, we end up giving up. And the moment we give up is when we finally realize it's been here all along. And so this is that feminine aspect, that surrendering, that acceptance, that embodiment of all that is already right here and right now. And that was really the big thing for me, the big kind of theme that kept coming through again and again, going on that journey. And I felt that it was important to share, because again, this is happening not just at an individual level, this is happening all around. And the ones that are becoming more aware of this and are recognizing what is going on are going to have the capacity to be at the forefront, the leaders. Because just like this whole system, this whole world that we live in has been largely a product. We've built all these systems, we've built all these structures, we've built all of these things that are upholding this current way of living in our current world. And inherently, just like if something is born, then there is the seed of death. And so all of these systems, a lot of them will likely have to die. And through the death, there's again the seed of the birth again. And so once the death happens, then there's going to need some kind of rebuilding process. And that's where there's a lot of us that are here right now to help in this transition, and then to be leaders in the rebuilding process. And so that's like personally for me, what I feel like I am here to do as part of my purpose in this physical life, and living here in this physical reality, is to be a leader in this transition and to help establish the kind of new way of being that is more in harmony with ourselves, more in harmony with who we are, which is nature. And so if you want to really get more and more clarity around who you are and what you're here to do, one of the best things that you can do is to just go out in nature and immerse yourself in ultimately where you came from, and just experience that knowingness that is present within nature. Because I've said this often, but I will continue to say it, a tree doesn't need to be taught how to be a tree. A bird doesn't need to be taught how to be a bird. An insect doesn't need to be taught how to be an insect. It's just its nature. It's just its way of being. And through its way of being, just like, going to the Smoky Mountains, just being immersed in the forest and witnessing all the different elements, how they all end up coordinating with one another. And like it creates this great symphony of life and abundance. And it's just a product of nature being what it is without having to be told what to do. And the same thing is true with you. You don't have to be told what to do. You may have to, let a lot of the structures and the ideas that you've held on to for so long die. And you may have to accept that the ideas of who you think you are may not actually be who you are. And, moving beyond the ideas and moving into the heart. And that's one great thing that nature will also teach you, is just getting out of your head. Because, we're so used to living here, and so used to occupying life through that lens, through our mind, through thinking, through ideas. But moving out of that, and again, moving into the heart, and then moving into the gut, and this kind of ancient primordial intelligence that is innate, that literally got us here. And that will, as this, as this cycle continues to unfold, it will be what continues to take us into the future. And so nature is a teacher in that way. And really, ultimately, it's just a teacher that is teaching you that there's nothing to learn, because everything is already right here and right now. And that's the big message for today. And so I hope this was helpful. And, if you need to, I know I got into some depths on some certain things, so I'd invite you to re-listen to this if you need to. And lastly, just share this. It's literally the easiest thing that you can do that helps to spread this message, because, me going on marketing campaigns and doing all that stuff is one thing. But if you listen to this and you've got some value, and you feel that somebody else might get some value, and you're able to share that, that's ultimately how this is really able to grow, and this message is able to spread to the people that need to hear this, because this isn't for everybody. Not everybody's ready for this type of stuff, and that's okay. I used to try to change my message because I was trying to come across a certain way and be perceived as a certain way by certain people. But then I realized I was ultimately just suppressing my own authentic expression of who I am. So yeah, so if you like this, share this shit. I appreciate it. So without further ado, before we go on to more and more rants, because there's many more to come, I'd like to leave you here in love, in unity, in just beingness. And as always, to end us off, to send us off, Remember, the journey is the way. And I hope you enjoy your journey, because that is the only way. Peace, y'all.